See, I think it's better to use this as a threat.
As a threat?
Yeah, Roger, sometime over the next year, you will encounter a girl who Gene and I have paid to have sex with you.
Are you going to tell me this? Or
No.
before
Leave
or
it up
after?
to a mystery.
You know?
Maybe your current friend is being paid to be with you.
Oh, that's probably a very true statement.
Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down the Nakatomi Tower at the Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Alan, John McClane kicked ass.
Welcome back to Shat The Movies, the podcast where we answer the question, were the movies we love when growing up really that good? You ever caught yourself thinking to yourself, why don't they make movies like they used to? Can you still remember spending your Friday night searching for the perfect movie rental at Blockbuster Video? Do you even remember what Blockbuster Video was? If you answered yes and this is the podcast for you, I'm one of your three co-hosts, Roger Roeper, and alongside me sitting in the same room for the second time are my co-hosts, Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And Gene Sam Sweet Lyons.
I'm healthy as a horse, not a drip.
And each week we take a look back in time and decide if our favorite films still hold up. Each week the audience selects from 6 movie choices that we then break out our VHS race car tape rewinder and watch the movie that tallied the highest number of votes. At the end of the podcast, the three of us will provide you, the audience, with the number of wipes each movie would take to get off your respective butts. So thank you so much for listening. If you have not already, hit that subscribe button and share with a friend. It's how we help the podcast grow. And you can also check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review television series such as Westworld, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, and True Detective. That being said, Big D, over the last few weeks, for almost like throughout the entire summer, we've been doing nothing but commission movies. People who have paid for VIP access. They've paid for the extra cable, if you will, for them to get to the front of the line and do their movies. This week, however, it was your birthday week. You came out to Scottsdale to visit myself and Gene, and we took a trip to Medieval Times because we were doing research and prep work for tonight's movie review.
Well, coming out here, we'd always joked about Medieval Times and about how iconically bad it is and that we should experience it. So once we made the plan to come out, we booked the tickets. The category that was due this week was the best of Jim Carrey. And what actually won was Dumb and Dumber. The Cable Guy was a distant fourth. I said, but the Cable Guy fits so perfectly with us going to Medieval Times. So we called an audible. We're going to push Dumb and Dumber back. The Cable Guy made more sense. So that's why today it had to do with my birthday and coming out to Arizona and experiencing the majestic Castle Scottsdale. We will be covering the 1996 Jim Carrey, The Cable Guy.
I think I need to step in here for a second and apologize to listener Anne, who wrote me and asked what was coming up. I mentioned that we were going to Medieval Times to check out the spectacle for The Cable Guy. And she said, why haven't you guys done Dumb and Dumber? And I was like, because nobody voted for it. So sorry, Ann, you were right.
Yes, Ann.
Maybe you were one of the people who voted for it. We apologize, but you're getting Cable Guy. That's what you get. You get your garlic bread. You get your tomato bisque.
Your quarter
soup,
roasted chicken.
Your quarter roasted chicken. Your dessert. Your potato. Your coffee. And Cable Guy.
Yeah. Well, The Cable Guy is a 1996 American black comedy thriller film directed by Ben Stiller. It stars Jim Carrey and Matthew Broderick. It was released in the United States on June 14th, 1996. The film also co-stars Leslie Mann, Jack Black, George Segal, Diane Baker, Eric Roberts, Owen Wilson, Janine Garofalo, David Cross, Andy Dick, Amy Stiller, and Bob Odenkirk. The film was a box office success, but received mixed reception from critics at the time. It has gone off to be a cult classic. We always ask the question, where were you? What are your memories the first time you watched this movie? We'll start with you, Gene.
So, guys, I'll admit I wasn't a big Jim Carrey fan before he started getting into dramatic roles. Like, that's really when I picked up on him with, Man on the Moon, and with Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. So I did love Dumb and Dumber, but I really didn't pick up on his 90s comedies. So I'd never seen like Cable Guy, Liar Liar, Bruce Almighty, or most of his other 90s movies. So I was going to thank Shat Nation for educating me on this, Jim, but thank you guys for just deciding to fucking go dictatorial and pick this movie. It was really worthwhile.
Yeah, you never saw this movie. This is your first time coming in. watching this movie.
Despite accusations on this podcast, I had never seen this fucking movie. And I think, in at least watching it with me, you guys can notice I've never fucking seen this movie.
No, it was quite. It's hard to find someone who hadn't seen this movie for the first time. So the fact that like someone on a podcast where we review movies, to find a movie that none of us has watched, and to be able to watch you watch it, was a thing of beauty. It was because we built up this entire weekend. Like, we're going to go to Medieval Times, we're going to watch The Cable Guy, and we're all going to do it together. And it was quite pleasant to watch because Big D, you've seen this movie multiple times.
I have, and I felt nervous watching Gene watching this movie because I was hoping he would like it. We had talked it up as something that was great. And I'm like, okay, is he going to like it? And as he laughed, I was like, okay, this is good. Good sign, good sign.
He didn't just laugh. He guffawed at a few places.
I clapped several times.
He did. But for me, I remember this in college. I saw it with some friends. We were probably drinking and stoned at the time, but we loved it. And I remember that Jim Carrey at that point, everybody just thought of him as the goofy, slapstick, Ace Ventura. Right. Everything was over the top. It was, he was bigger than life, but it was always in a positive way. And this shit came out and it was dark. And this is well before people respected him as an actor. You know, before he did Man in the Moon, Truman Show, which he won a Golden Globe for both. And then eventually Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, like Gene said. But nobody thought this was in him. And people went there that day. I can remember like, oh, this is going to be goofy Jim Carrey. And halfway through, they were like, what the fuck am I watching? This dude is troubled. So it was a great change of pace. And I think today it stands alone as one of his most original characters and really just threw everybody a curveball.
So did you immediately like it? Or did the rest of the people in your group also like it? Or
yeah, it's hard though in college because you're usually inebriated. So we liked most things.
Right.
But yeah, we were like, what was that? That was something very different. And then upon subsequent watches, that's when you really start to pick up the little layers of comedy. But right away we liked it just because it was something so different.
It's strange because I'm a huge Jim Carrey fan. I like Jim Carrey, not as much as I like Kevin Smith, but I do like Jim Carrey. And at the time, you're right. This was one of those situations where he was at the pinnacle of his success, right? I think he had been in Batman Returns. He had done the 2 Ace Venturas, and he was the most bankable character in Hollywood at this time. Like, he was a money making machine, and I think the expectations for Cable Guy was so huge that when it made respectable money, but when it didn't make like Infinity War fucking money, people were like, well, it's his bomb. And I think at the time, I don't know if as a nation we were gaslit into thinking this movie wasn't good. And maybe, I don't know, we were in high school, right? I was 16 at the time?
19.
College.
No.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, shit, no, I'm sorry.
No, 96, yeah. This was...
I was thinking of Doc.
We were 16 because I went with my high school girlfriend, and I remember watching it thinking we were going to go see an Ace Ventura: When Nature Calls, and it was not that at all. And I remember not liking it initially. But upon subsequent view, when I got to college, this was the movie that you would turn on after you came home after the bars. It was this and Half Baked. So this is one of my favorite movies. I'm glad we're doing it. I think it's a masterpiece in my opinion. So with that being said, Big D, play the trailer.
Cable Guy!
Let's do this.
Slip the Cable Guy $50. He'll give you all the movie channels for free.
You're offering me a bribe. What you have just done is illegal. And in this state, if convicted, you could be fined up to $5,000 or spend 6 months in a correctional facility.
Oh, please. No, that was dumb. I was just making conversation.
I'm just jerking your chin. I'll juice you up.
For Steven Kovacs.
Hey! You guys play here too?
Cool.
The price of cable just went up.
Okay, Chip Douglas, you're on my team. Let's play.
No way. I'm on Steven's team.
Now,
We're not friends. I don't even know you.
Well, let's fix that.
he's got a friend he can't control.
Where are we going?
Only the finest restaurant in town.
Can I have your skin? Check this out. Silence of the Lambs.
I just don't have any room in my life for a new friend.
So, what are you trying to say?
A friend who will not be ignored.
I gave you free cable.
The guy is a sociopath. He leaves messages on my machine night and day.
If you're there, pick up. Pick up, pick up, pick up, pick up, pick up.
He shows up wherever I go. He won't leave me alone.
He's gonna need some tough love.
There's Steven Kovacs in here.
I'm Steven Kovacs. I didn't do anything. Just call my cable guy.
Police look into it. Nobody named Chip Douglas works for the cable company.
Suspicious, isn't it?
You're all being fooled by him. He's a lunatic and he's a felon.
Don't mess with me.
Come back here so that I may bring thee. I'm here for you.
Don't do that. You're gonna get me killed.
Oh, Billy.
Jim Carrey, Matthew Broderick, the cable guy.
Okay, I'm going. Take off.
After a failed marriage proposal, Steven Kovacs moves into his own apartment. Steven bribes his cable guy, Ernie Chip Douglas, to give him free movie channels. Chip gets Steven to hang out with him for the next day and makes him one of his preferred customers. Chip takes Steven up to a satellite dish and advises him to admit his faults to his ex-girlfriend Robin and invite her over to watch Sleepless in Seattle on cable. Chip runs into Steven and his friends at the gym and leaves several messages on Steven's answering machine. When Robin comes over to watch the movie, the cable is out due to Chip, who has intentionally sabotaged Steven's cable. Chip fixes the cable under the condition that they hang out again, to which Steven reluctantly agrees.
So Big D asked me after we watched this movie, when was the point when you decided that this movie was funny or that you liked it? And it was honestly the second that you heard Jim Carrey's voice coming from off screen. Ben Stiller and the rest of the production crew in this movie understood every capability that Jim Carrey has, and they used it to maximum advantage. So they just let him off screen just keep saying cable guy in his Jim Carrey voice, and he knows how to do it when he's not even on the screen. But then, you know, you get to see him on camera. And Big D, you talked last week when we were reviewing Dogma about how Kevin Smith shot everything straight on, edited very basically, and the film, you know, suffered for it. The cable guy, on the other hand, uses fantastically different camera direction from Ben Stiller and crew. And one of my favorite effects is those peephole shots of Jim Carrey, where he's in the hallway and he's moving back and forth. You can tell that Jim Carrey studied that lens. Yeah. He understood what it did to distort his body and his movement, and then he used it to comedic advantage. You have a weird depth of field, and you know, with the body being distorted, getting bigger and smaller, and he's going back and forth a lot. And later in the movie, he does that kind of like walking down the stairs thing, and it's funny because of the lens that they're shooting through. So immediately, everyone involved in this movie is so aware of what sound is doing for comedy, what sight is doing for comedy, and it's off to a strong start.
Yeah, you know, he was part of everything, like from In Living Color up until The Cable Guy. He was this rubbery, you know, almost like family comedic actor too, because kids liked him because of Ace Ventura. And then for him to do this dark, weird comedy, I think in the hands of someone who would be less talented, like Ben Stiller, I think is extremely talented. Judd Apatow had a hand in this as a producer, co-writer. Without those comedic talents all coming together, this film doesn't work.
No, and I think you needed him to tone it down. You needed him to give you 70% Jim Carrey. And you understand why he's willing to tolerate him being annoying to try to get the hookup. And it got me thinking that, I mean, today, but there is no real cable hookup anymore. There's no more black boxes. The most you could do is get like the, you know, the jailbroken Roku sticks or Roger's Amazon Fire hack.
It's a firebox. It's a fire. I mean, it doesn't take much to hack these things anymore.
No, but I mean, you don't need to pay or beg anyone.
No.
So when I was at Fort Campbell and you finally hit sergeant, they would give you the basic housing allowance so you could move off post. So my roommate and I at that point, another sergeant, had gotten a house. And when the guy came to hook up the cable, I'm like, shit, okay, is it worth it? Should we ask him? And I was used to New York where you pay the guy a couple $100. They'd give you like the jailbroken cable box and you could get all the channels. And I was like, okay, so let's try this. I was like, hey, is there a chance you could hook us up? He's like, oh, yeah. You give me $15, I'll hook you up. And I was like, okay. So I gave the guy $15, not expecting anything, because what are you going to get for $15? For 4 years, I received every channel on that cable box, and my monthly bill was $13. So we would periodically get phone calls from the cable company being like, hello, we're doing a test. Could you please turn to channel 52 HBO and tell us is it a clear picture? And I'd be like, I don't get HBO. Well, would you like to? they knew who's getting a $13 package. So they would call and try to bait us into telling the truth. Never did. Best value ever. $15. Much better than I could have hoped.
So at the time, I think 52 channels was the most that you could get, though, right?
No, it was a lot. It was. Okay. I mean, this was, we're talking early 2000s.
Okay.
This is 2001, 2, 3. But they would just try to question you to get a channel because we were supposed to get 13 channels.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. You're supposed to get just the basic ones, but you're getting. Well, I mean, but like this movie answers the question: what would you do if that guy who you paid $15 to wanted to hang out with you and your buddy? But it also answers the question: what were the '90s like? Because like in the first 10 minutes, it is a time capsule for that era. The first opening, like over the opening credits, you have all the flashbacks of like famous shows that I remember, like Press Your Luck. All these shows that we grew up with as children. You had people waiting for the cable guy to show up. That was a thing. It's not really a thing anymore. Answering machines, cassette tapes, tube televisions, a young Jack Black. I mean, this movie has Janine Garofalo in it. Like, I mean, it is, if someone were to say, hey, what were the 90s like? It'd be Empire Records and I think the cable guy. Those are the two ones. Show me something that's not around anymore. Record stores and the need for cable.
Yeah, but they also use that as a plot device to tell the story, which is great. So you get there an MTV news break, and kids, this is when MTV used to show videos and talk about music news and things that were happening. And we get the first introduction to the Sam Sweet. The parody. It's a parody of the Mendez brothers who killed their parents. So it's a story of Stan and Sam Sweet.
Right.
And they're played by Ben Stiller brilliantly. So it goes throughout the entire movie. We see updates on the trial, and it's Tabitha Soren who's giving you the news break, who's nothing more than 90s. And we get to a point where they do the MTV news break, and it is Ben Stiller's character, Sam Sweet. He's on the stand, and they play his 911 tape.
Yeah, this is where if any of your friends does like a nondescript accent, it always is like, well, I think he sounded Asian. He looked Asian. I'm pretty sure he was Asian.
We talked earlier about Jim Carrey and having his voice off camera and still being funny. Ben Stiller, guys, I couldn't breathe. I was in tears during this scene. And it's because they add in just a little bit more. And Big D, you mentioned it when we were talking about this earlier. You're hearing his voice, and then you're seeing Ben Stiller's very subtle reaction on the stand as he's listening to his own 911 call. And it's just, again, I can see where maybe critics or people reviewing this movie online don't get it. Like they didn't get, and I hate to be that guy who's like, well, I'm funnier or smarter than you are, person who didn't get it, but you really didn't get it. Yeah. Like an average person or below average person might look at that and go, what? It's Ben Stiller sitting on a stand and it's a recording of a phone call. But it's that ineffable quality about it that a person who really gets humor is gonna find hilarious, and it's just gonna go over everybody else's head.
And a lot of times a connective joke that runs throughout a movie doesn't work because it's not interesting or the joke kind of falls flat, and then you have to endure multiple iterations of callbacks to that. This movie, you're like, oh my God, this is hilarious. And then it comes back to it and you're like, oh my God. And you just keep learning. Like you said, you keep learning more and more about it. And I think it's one of the best things in the movie, alongside that it has a prophetic vision of what the future is and what impact that has on our culture. When you think of, at the time, we were so obsessed with the trials of the Menendez and the O.J. Simpson. And then there was a lot of times they use the people fighting each other on shows like Jerry Springer and whatnot. And now you see what we've grown to today, even after the speech that Jim Carrey says, someday you'll be able to play Mortal Kombat with your friend across the world. Like, I mean, we've come to that. We've been able to connect, and kind of all came true.
Yeah, the movie's a lot of things, actually. So it's a dark comedy, true. It's prophetic, absolutely true. And I think also what allows it to be weird and wacky is that it connects with things that we all experience. So like when you think about horror movies, the scariest horror movies are the ones that take common things that are like in your home or in your life and make them scary, like what The Ring did with TVs, you know? Mm-hmm. And what they do here is they do the premise of we've all had this friend, the worst kind of friend. It's the friend that has something that you really need, and you don't want to hang out with that person. And when they create that situation and then crank it up, we can all relate to that because you had that fear But the fear was like, oh, do I have to hang out with this guy again, or is he going to insert himself into my life? And it's like, oh, let's take that and turn it up to 11.
But did you ever find yourself kind of sympathizing with Chip throughout the movie?
No, it was the opposite for me.
Really?
I was Steven, you know. I had friends in elementary school. I actually told my mom once, I got in a fight with this kid, Jeremy, when I was about 4 or 5 years old. He had one of those G.I. Joe F-14 Tomcats. Of course. And we were playing with it, and I think I hit him. And he's crying. My mom's like, you don't hit your friends? And I'm like, Jeremy's not my friend. I just like his toys. Oh. And that went on through, you know, high school. You had the friends who could drive first, and you maybe didn't like them, but they had a car. I'm not talking about you, David, or you, Ryan. Or in college, you know, you had that friend that had the drug hookup, but he was like kind of fucking weird, and you didn't want to hang out with him. You know, he's kind of a pothead, or he had the ecstasy, but he's like, but now he wants to hang out all night. You don't really want to fucking and now it's that friend with the boat or the hot sister. Or whatever, but
or both.
Maybe I'm a fucking awful person because I try not to take it. I'm not trying to take advantage of these people, but they offer and they offer and they offer, and then you take it, and now you've got a contract of some sort, and it fucking sucks.
Yeah. I mean, as you learn his backstory, did that change the way you felt? Because you remember in Scrooged, Frank Cross is this reprehensible head of the network, and as you see what's caused him to be that way. His parents just put him in front of the TV, and the TV raised him. The reason that Chip is like this is because his mother was out looking for a father for him to make a brother or sister.
Yeah.
When you saw that, even though you knew he was psychotic, did you have some sympathy for him?
Oh, no, I definitely felt for him. And as the movie goes on, I think as he gets darker, you still have that lingering sympathy. And I think Steven, you know, Matthew Broderick's character, does as well. Sympathy, yes, but could I identify with them? Not really.
But have you ever, I mean, as you get older, and I experienced this when I moved to Arizona, it was difficult to meet new friends in your 30s. Like, how do you meet people in your 30s? And if you're kind of a lonely guy like this Chip guy is, or, you know, maybe you don't make friends easily, maybe you can come on a little too strong, right? Like, have you ever done this? Like, in your 30s, have you ever come on too strong to someone that you want new friends, or has anyone ever come on too strong for you and you had to do the whole Heisman keep you away?
I think in my professional life, in my academic life, and in my personal life, I've always tried to avoid friends and relationships, and they just sort of like happen. I think it's been the story of my life. And, you know, Carrie Gross and I used to like employ the Drakeism, the no new friends. Like, it's like, I'm almost 40. I don't want any new friends. You know, I make them sometimes, but I don't, you know, I don't really seek them. I don't, another friend sounds like a really bad time.
I don't know, but let's say you meet like a nice guy, like maybe at your Krav Maga class, and maybe he's like, hey, you get paired up with him as a partner, and then you start hanging out more and more. And then suddenly, like, he buys you a new stereo system and a new flat panel TV, and he's like, I figured we could watch this. I mean, with a new MMA fight pay-per-view that's coming on Saturday, I'm going to invite some friends over.
You start synchronizing your diet.
Yeah. Do you synchronize your diet? Talk about your macros together?
Maybe book a trip to Salt Lake City in October together.
Oh, really?
To stay at his house
when
in Salt Lake.
When you and Chad become more, when we go to your, I assume there's some sort of, when there's some sort of like Mormon indoctrination into the church, I mean, surely you're going to become Mormon I'd say by 2021, you're going to be fully Mormon.
Well, we are going on I believe it's a 5-day hike on the Highline Trail, which is going to be me and Chad, our backpacks, our tents.
Who do you think is the Chip in the relationship?
I know.
Who's the Chip in you and Chad's relationship?
So, next plot point.
Hey, Steven! I can just see you outside the crowd. Hey, Dad, where are we going?
I think this is the time to admit that I also the way that Chad and I became friends actually is I saw he was wearing a shirt and I liked it, and then he's like, "Do you want it?" And I was like, "Yeah, I mean it's a cool shirt." And he's like, "Well, just buy me another shirt and you can have this shirt." And I was like, "Okay." So I traded him a brand new shirt for his shirt that he'd been wearing for a year. That's normal.
Did he take it off?
Yeah, he took it off his body and just gave it. It wasn't sweaty, but he gave it to me. Yeah.
Did you look at the body for a while? I mean, you were like,
he's a trim guy. Yeah.
He's a good-looking guy. Yeah.
We we almost wear the same size in shirts and pants.
Nice.
So that's good.
It's pretty good.
Double your wardrobe.
When this whole thing is over, I think we should get a house together. Chip.
We've actually looked into like a compound.
I know you have. I knew it. Chip takes Steven to medieval times where Chip arranges for them to battle in the arena, referencing the Star Trek episode Amok Time. Later, Chip reveals that he's installed an expensive home theater system in his living room, and Chip later hosts a party at Steven's apartment attended by Chip's other preferred customers. Steven decides to enjoy the party with Chip's help, and Steven sleeps with a young party guest named Heather, who Chip reveals is a prostitute that he hired specifically for Steven, to which Steven responds by throwing him out.
So this movie is filled with cameos, and I think we're going to keep referencing Dogma because we just reviewed it. But unlike Dogma, where I would groan with almost each cameo, I was consistently surprised and excited each time an actor I loved popped up on screen during The Cable Guy. And I think the biggest and best surprise that we all forgot was Andy Dick as the ringmaster at Medieval Times. Like, we just went yesterday to the new Scottsdale Castle, and this movie fucking nails the spectacular ridiculousness of live anachronistic combat dinner theater.
Yeah, so that was so I was reading a little bit about this before the podcast, and that was a contribution by Judd Apatow and Jim Carrey. Jim Carrey was the one who actually suggested that, like, hey, no movie has ever addressed this ridiculousness that is Medieval Times. Would make a perfect plot point for this movie. They actually did film on site at a medieval. I think it was in the New Jersey.
No, I think it was Los Angeles.
What was it, the LA one? The Buena Park. There's one in California, Buena Park. So they went there. Ferris Bueller. Matthew Broderick. He's actually allergic to horses. So the 16-hour day shoot inside, he's like purposefully not trying to sneeze or have an allergic reaction.
Well, at least there's no horses at the Scottsdale Castle.
Can we? Okay. Purposefully, do we have time to set aside to talk about what Medieval Times is? Because, okay, so you came out. One of the things that we talked about is your birthday is going to coincide, your trip out here, with the opening of the Scottsdale Castle, which is right down the street from my house. So it's myself, it's Gene, it's Chad, and Big D, and we're going to go to the 7:00 show. So we've all been to Medieval Times before, right? Big D, you went to the one in Orlando.
Yeah. So the difference here is in Orlando, it's a large castle that looks like a castle. In Arizona, everything is cookie cutter. Like, if you have a Taco Bell, it just looks like a cinder block brown building with a Taco Bell sign on it. Everything in Arizona looks identical. It could be a Walgreens. It could be a CVS. It could be anything. A McDonald's. You don't know except for just the one little sign. So we pull up to the castle, and it looks like a Costco. It could be one large nondescript building, so I'm disappointed right there. It's got like a moat. I think you'd call it a dry moat with rocks, which is very Arizona. But we get in there. The AC doesn't work. Okay, that's a negative thing. It doesn't look much like a castle. We took the dungeon tour. It wasn't too impressive.
It was just like, here's a reproduction of a torture tool with a picture of what this should look like.
So Roger's bedroom has a walk-in closet that goes to his laundry room. Yeah. That is the size of this dungeon museum. It is not big. They also had there's a torture device called the Thumbscrew, where you basically it's like two boards and they have these screws that you turn and then it crushes the person's thumbs as you interrogate them. This gentleman standing next to me as I was looking at it pointed out that they were steel screws that were like way too new to be. He's like, they're not even trying anymore. I was like, no. They really aren't.
Well, part of the allure of going to like the Orlando location is they had like a medieval village where you could go and you could see like artisans and blacksmiths. And then they had like a whole torture room, kind of like what we saw today, but like more like they were actually trying. This one felt like at any point, if Medieval Times goes squirrely and goes south, they can flip this into a Trader Joe's tomorrow. Yeah,
it's a Trader Joe's, or I was thinking more like a hometown buffet. It's kind of got that feeling to it. But, you know, Big D, you can't say that the people of Medieval Times didn't warn you against booking the Scottsdale Castle.
They did. When I called to book the tickets, the nice gentleman from Medieval Times said, "Do you really want to go to this castle?"
He was really putting in
He said, you know, they're still working out the kinks. And I said, yes, I want to go to this castle because I figure when else are they going to be motivated to really put on a good show? I figured we're going to get people's best. Broken AC, a building that looks like it's a parachute. It's an escape route. They know they know that the business is going under in a year. They're already thinking about flipping it. The actors were, I'd say, probably 50% good, 50%.
Yeah, it was like Dogma.
You
50
could tell
were good,
the first
50 were
night.
bad. That's right.
It got to the point where the first probably hour was. It was like a horse show. It was like Best in Show, like where they do the dogs, where they parade them around, and there was like horses prancing. We wanted battles, and there was none. So we started rewriting basically their script.
Yeah, it's interesting that in a world where Game of Thrones was the most popular television show, you have to imagine this must have bled over into medieval times. Like for the last 8 years, they were living off of Game of Thrones, where people wanted to see men with long hair on horseback battling. Like Renaissance fairs had a renaissance, if you will, as a result of Game of Thrones. And they adapted. You could go to artisans where you could buy dragons and dragon eggs. And I felt like medieval times was still stuck in that 80s. We're just now learning about what medieval times was.
Well, at least they had authentic Game of Thrones drinking horns.
The great thing about it being like, I guess, I don't know if it was a soft opening or it was opening weekend, right? This was the official.
Oh, no, it's been open for like, I think 2 weeks.
Oh,
now.
2 weeks. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, they still look like they're in opening mode because it almost looks like every bartender, every employee is there. And if you've ever opened a new location anywhere else, they put all their staff. So the bar, for as many people as showed up in costume, mind you, for Phoenix at 7:00 on a Saturday, I was like, oh, this might be fun. The bar was super long. They made it more adult themed, but you can definitely tell this is where they're making their money because we see all their commemorative glasses on the bar, and I'm like a fish, like I'm attracted to shiny objects, and so I see this horn, this drinking horn. Big D's like, oh, we got to get one of those, and I'm like, it's your birthday, big guy, let's go. 2 drinking horn Arizona lights, please. And so the guy, he goes and gets his horn, and it's cool. They like for a plastic horn, they give you like it looks
like Tormund's
yeah,
drinking
it's like
horn.
Tormund's drink. Yeah, you're like, I can't wait to suckle the giant woman's teat. And he goes to ring me up, and he rings me up 1, and then 2, and I'm like, oh boy, this is where they're making their profit. Each drinking horn filled with maybe, I don't know, 24 ounces.
That was like 50 ounces. That was a big.
No. Regardless, our drinking horns cost me $105, which. I mean, that's crazy.
You can't put a price on a memory like that.
That's right. But you said that the show kind of sucks. It dragged on like season 8 of Game of Thrones. It's like almost like when you're done, we're almost through the entire main course. So you had dragon's blood soup. You had a baby dragon, which was chicken. You had like a garlic bread. You had potato, and what was the other thing? Corn. At the end of it, we still haven't seen any fucking jousting. We haven't seen anyone doing any kind of sporting games at all.
So I was making a joke while we were there that like Big D was our dad and we were all his kids. I'm like, Dad, can we, go see the dungeon? Dad, can you get a drinking horn? I turned into the dad later because Big D literally stops the server and he's like, is there going to be fighting? What are you, fucking 12? Yes, there's going to be fighting.
I thought it was like a horse show. We started rewriting the script. We're like, why are there no magicians? There should be
no wizards. Why
don't the
medieval magicians were called wizards?
Instead of a horse prancing around and Roger being concerned because the guy has a whip, you have a wizard appear, have some kind of mystical fire. Instead, it was like a pony show for a majority of it, and I was concerned that they had sanitized it to the point where there was no combat. And to show you how the crowd took it, right? So it's been an hour and something. We've eaten. Everyone's now getting sour because we want to see some fighting. The queen who's up on the stage says, what should we do with this warrior? Should we spare him? Or should we kill him? Everybody's like, kill him. Let him die. Kids are screaming to kill this poor character.
They wanted blood. They wanted blood.
Children were screaming for him to die.
It was crazy.
I voted spare him, just on the record.
It's terrible.
Yeah, I mean, I'd go back to medieval times for $7 beers if they actually let us go out there and fight. That'd be cool. Getting back to the movie, there was something amazing that was going on in the scene where I really started to be increasingly impressed with this movie, and that's the way that they were using the soundtrack of the movie to match the action on the screen. But more importantly, they matched the soundtrack to Chip's insane mind. So when they're doing the Star Trek fight from Muck Time, Chip starts singing the brass section of the music from that Star Trek episode. And then the film begins playing the music from that episode. And so the movie's like subtly bringing you into Chip's derangement. And it's so well done because like I'm watching this and I'm feeling like I'm going crazy, like watching this scene. And it's just like, again, and credit to Matthew Broderick because several of the actors who appear alongside Jim Carrey in this movie are doing such a wonderful job of just letting him shine by playing second fiddle and not trying to steal the scene. You know, Matthew Broderick is doing exactly what he's supposed to do to make Jim Carrey more effective. It's perfect.
The other thing that a lot of people notice, and it was a deliberate choice by Jim Carrey, is the lisp that he's doing throughout the entire movie. That was, I remember one of the things when the movie first came out that people didn't like, but now looking back on it, it's something that I enjoy a lot about the movie. Did the lisp take away from the performance for you, for Jim Carrey, or is it something that you felt was needed?
I think it worked, and it goes back to what you guys were talking about the sympathy for this character, right? It's that it makes him more sympathetic. Like, if he was not burdened with being physically awkward, if he wasn't burdened, because he's very powerful in this movie, right? Yeah. He's got the cable hookup, he's got all these buddies, he owns the town, right? And so you have to give him some flaws that even he is eventually, aware of. And it is funny that, he's not even aware that he has a speech impediment at first, then it kind of like clicks. But
I think he's well aware.
Yeah, he's well aware of it.
It's one of those hot buttons for him.
That's right.
Where he is a perfectionist, and he even says in there that he's a perfectionist, and he says it with a lisp, and he stops, gets a little disgusted with himself, rewinds. So he's aware of that weakness, and that he's vulnerable in that way. I think it's very important.
Yeah, I think if you had to make an analogy of what Chip is in modern times, I think he's a human incarnation of like a 4chan user or a Reddit user who doesn't have, probably more 4chan, where they don't have a lot of friends. They don't know how to make friends. They only talk in television or media language and lingo. And that's their connective tissue, because when they're having that karaoke party, the cast of characters that come in and surround in Chip's world is almost like being on a 4chan thread.
But it's glorious. You can't even expect it. They show up at the house for the party. It's an assortment. There's like an old Asian couple.
This is great.
There's a police officer in uniform. There's some just random misfits. A guy in a leisure suit. You don't know where these characters have come from, but I found myself thinking, I want to be at this party. Fuck beautiful people. Fuck the cool people. I want to be at a party with misfits because it's always fun. It's more genuine. You don't know what you're going to get. And these rejects and these eccentric old people, this scene is so epic because you could see it happening, and I want to be there.
Yeah. Well, the other person that shows up here and you think, well, Steven, just got out of a relationship. He finds out that his ex is going on a date, and then he finds, a beautiful girl, and then they hook up, and you think, okay, well, this is all going well for him. And it turns out that this was a prostitute that Chip had pitched in for Steven.
Yeah, and this became a hot topic where I said, is it a betrayal if your friend tries to pick you up? You're single, you're feeling down, you've just broken up with the girl you love, she's moving on. If someone was to buy you a prostitute, unbeknownst to you, you weren't married, in an effort to help you, would you get offended?
If it's a sex worker that has not been trafficked, this is just somebody who chose that line of work and enjoys it, party on. No, it's not a betrayal. I'm like, thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. Because I wouldn't do it personally, and I don't have a moral objection against prostitution. It's just that I can't enjoy it if I know that it's happening because I gave somebody money, right? It doesn't feel good to me. Like, part of sexual arousal is being wanted, right? If that person only wants me for the money, it's not a thing. But if one of you guys were, I don't know, secretly to maybe find a sex worker and maybe later tonight, maybe pay for that, maybe I wouldn't have to know about it. Maybe it'd be awesome. Maybe.
But is that only in the situation where you didn't know and you actually thought that she was someone that you connected with?
I think the key is you can't let them find out.
Okay.
If you want to help them get over the breakup and feel better about themselves, you have to keep that secret. Let them just be like, man, I really like that girl. I wonder why she didn't call me back.
Well, I think the situation comes into how would you react once you know, like, have you ever had a one night affair or one night stand?
Yes.
Have you ever had a one night stand?
Yes.
Do you think any of them were ever sex workers? Paid for by one of your friends?
No, because they all happened when I was like in high school and college, and nobody had money for
that.
My
friends are too cheap.
So it wouldn't have happened.
No, it wouldn't have happened.
All right. Okay, so that would be the only way that you would approve this. Not a situation. If I said to you, "Hey, Gene, just to let you know, tonight you're in for a surprise. Yeah, I've invited one of my friends over. She happens to be a sex worker. Yeah, I tried her out last week, perfectly fine, and I'm healthy as a horse, not even a drip. Would you be okay with sleeping with her? Would you go through with it?
Do I have to have vaginal intercourse with her?
I don't know. I paid for the VIP package. It's up to you what you want to do.
So there's a drinking horn and everything? Or?
You get the $42 drinking horn. You get a banner.
VIP seating?
Yeah, VIP. You get to sit in front. I mean, there may or may not be a horse and a whip.
A couple of my friends earlier this weekend asked me what good a hand job was at Portillo's. Yeah, it was you.
I did. I said that.
Yeah. I think a hand job from a nice stranger would be just fine.
See, I think it's better to use this as a threat.
As a threat?
Yeah, Roger.
Okay.
Sometime over the next year, you will encounter a girl who Gene and I have paid to have sex with you.
Okay. Are you going to tell me this, or
no?
Before
Leave it up to a mystery.
Am I with someone at this time?
I don't know. It could be just someone who just catches your eye.
No, but if I'm with someone, I can't do it. I mean, that's the rule.
Who knows?
Right?
Who knows?
I don't know. I think I'm like you. Like if I ever were to encounter into a sex worker, I think for me, the only thing that I would ever be happy with or ever like go through with is like you, a good old fashioned, good, clean old fashioned. No one gets hurt. No one gets injured. Yeah. You know,
maybe your current friend is being paid to be with you.
Oh, that's probably a very true statement. The unfortunate thing, I don't think she is. She volunteers, so she deals a lot with people down on her luck, and
she's being paid in blissful life experiences, like brunch with you two.
Well, Chip tracks down Robin, who's on a date with another man. Chip severely beats the man and tells him to stay away from Robin. He later upgrades Robin's cable, saying that it's on Steven. Robin decides to get back together with Steven as a result. Steven tells Chip they cannot be friends, which sets Chip on a series of vengeful acts. He gets Steven arrested, and during his time in jail, Steven is visited by his parents and Chip, who mocks him through a prison visitation window. Steven tries to alert a guard about Chip, but the guard is one of Chip's preferred customers and thus does not react. After a weekend of humiliation, Steven is released on bail.
Just when I think this movie can't get funnier, it just keeps getting funnier. Raj, you were reading the plot synopsis, and I'm already starting to laugh about the bathroom beating. See, Jim Carrey, a lot like Will Ferrell, he's the kind of comedic actor that just needs a stage or even a cage in which to operate. And then you just stand back and you leave everything to him. And he can take a simple concept like assault in a bathroom, and then he takes it to gloriously strange places. And again, credit to Owen Wilson for just going with it and not fighting for the spotlight. Jim Carrey can't have somebody else in the scene trying to distract you. He's got to be able to just work. And again, I'm a believer now. I used to think Jim Carrey, it was too much physical comedy. I'm not a big fan. He's just trying to be weird, but he's so creative in that space that when you look at it, it's a bathroom. That's all it is. It's a bathroom. And somehow he's making this scene just painfully hilarious.
Yeah, the way he's dressed, similar to Freddie Mercury. And he struts into the restaurant, goes into the bathroom, assumes the role as the bathroom attendant. He's owning it. And amazingly, this was the first acting role that someone was paid $20 million for. So Jim Carrey was now paid. He's the top grossing actor of the day. And people are expecting another Jim Carrey. They expect him to be climbing out of a rhinoceros ass, like in Ventura. And when this comes out, and it is something very different. Yeah, he's goofy on the surface, but it's dark. He's creepy. He's actually sinister. And I think the movie broke from everything he had done before, and it really, people didn't know what to think.
And in this bathroom beating scene, again, I mentioned how simple it was in concept, but I dare you to find a comedy that stacks up against The Cable Guy in its beautiful complexity in executing a simple scene. So there's this scene, this beating scene, and
assault.
Yeah, and you see Jim Carrey put Owen Wilson's mouth at one point against the hand dryer nozzle, and he inflates his cheeks. And most comedies just stop right there, right? It's like, oh, he put his mouth on the nozzle.
It's in The Naked Gun. It's in The Naked Gun where they're fighting in the bathroom scene, and Leslie Nelson turns up the thing, and they're both blowing. Yeah, exactly. Right. But in this, it's a new take on that same joke.
Yeah, because when you're laughing, but you don't know why. And then when you dissect it, you go, holy shit, what are they doing here? So let's dissect that joke. So Jim Carrey comments at this point that Owen Wilson looks like Dizzy Gillespie, right? Who's the trumpet player who's famous for like puffing out his cheeks while he's playing. And okay, you get it. You know, his cheeks are inflated. But then the movie itself starts playing a trumpet solo from a Dizzy song while Jim Carrey continues to assault Owen Wilson while he's like now like jazz, like scat singing. And then as he like does this little tap and snap, he concludes by saying "Salt Peanuts," which is the title of the fucking song.
Yeah.
It's like this is just genius stuff. And again, I think people watching this movie, reviewing this movie, rating this movie online, they didn't get that. No, they just heard some trumpet music and Jim Carrey being a weirdo.
What is this on Rotten Tomatoes? Is it over? Is it fresh?
52.
It's only at 52% on Rotten Tomatoes.
I think it's real bad.
From a tomato score?
Yep.
That's insane, because we've been talking a lot about Jim Carrey and how much of a genius he is. But a lot of people don't know that this was produced and unofficially co-written by Judd Apatow, who actually lost an intense Writers Guild arbitration battle with Lou Holtz Jr., no relation to the football coach Lou Holtz, over writing the script. Holtz's version was, according to director Ben Stiller, basically just a silly buddy comedy. One that probably called for that bathroom scene to be more Naked Gun cartoonish 1990s comedy versus what it turned into today. And unfortunately, Judd Apatow doesn't get the applause for the impact that he had on developing the script, and it kind of stinks. Well, during a dinner with his family and Robin, Steven is horrified to see Chip in attendance. Steven privately tells him to leave, but Chip tells him to play along or he will show everyone a picture of Steven with the sex worker. The evening goes from bad to worse when Chip manipulates the family, tells several bad jokes, and eventually pushes Steven too far by playing a sexualized version of the game show Password with the rest of the family. Chip whispers in Steven's ear about a mole on Robin's back, which results in Steven punching Chip in the face, shocking everyone else. Chip leaves, feigning defeat and depression, and Steven is fired from his job the next day when Chip sends out a video of Steven insulting his boss that was recorded on a hidden camera in his apartment.
So Chip now starts sabotaging Steven's poor life. And it got me thinking about how easy it is to fuck up somebody's life. Oh, yeah. Super easy. If you were to hide, say, a pair of panties in a married man's car, the wife will find it. You can't explain that away. If you hide a used condom somewhere where a husband's going to find it and his wife's stuff, you can't explain that away. And I had a personal case with this. Roger and I went on a cruise probably 3 or 4 years ago. Maybe.
It was 2014.
Okay, so it was a while ago. And my wife had a friend who was unhappy in her marriage. She's now divorced. Her husband is much happier. And she wanted other people to be miserable. And I remember her going to my wife. And my wife, one of her big things is she will never tolerate illegal drug use. It's a deal breaker for her. So she knew that. So the friend went to her. She wanted someone else to be miserable and to be alone as she was going to start to go through her divorce. So she went and told my wife, I saw your husband doing drugs on the cruise. So the cruise ends. My wife had been acting strange. She comes to me and is crying and says, I know you were doing drugs. Why don't you tell me? I said, what are you, crazy? I know you were doing drugs. So I said, we're going to have some fun right now. I said, you're going to tell me how you think this happened. And then we're going to go take a hair follicle test. We're going to go to Quest Labs. And she's like, well, my friend Samantha told me she saw you doing it. So I said, well, great. After we do this, I'm going to send Samantha a framed test results that shows I'm clean, and Samantha will never set foot in our house again because she's intentionally trying to sabotage our marriage. So my piece of advice to you people out there, be careful, because there are crazy people who are in your circle of family and friends who are unhappy, who would like other people to be unhappy. If she had told my wife I saw him kissing someone else, I couldn't have defended that. My marriage would be over. But because she chose something that I could prove, and the follicle test goes back 6 months, 8 months, something ridiculous like that, my wife was able to see that the friend was lying and able to cut her out of her life. So just be careful out there, people.
You know, we've been talking in this pod about the surprisingly negative reviews this movie received, both critically and online. And Raj mentioned because it's so dark and people just didn't know what to think of it. And I don't think that was a bug. Like, I don't think the darkness of this movie was unintentional. As you mentioned, Apatow had a hand in this. Jim Carrey is notably a fairly dark guy when you get down to the core of it. I think it's a feature. I think this was very, very intentional. And when Steven gets out of jail and sees Chip with his family, like, I was angry about it. I was like, oh, fuck, no, you know? And that's hard for a comedy to do. Think about comedies that you watch normally, and you might laugh at stuff, but how often do you get mad about anything or feel, like, genuinely threatened? Like, it's a bad situation. And personally, like, I would not be able to resist assaulting any dangerous person who got that close to my family. Like, that's a line you don't cross. If I see you in my mom's home and you're trying to fuck shit up, like, I don't care who's there or what you're saying. Like, you're going outside and you're getting a fucking beat down. That's that.
Steven, just calm down. Back up. And you hear Chip go, it's okay. I know he's just angry, and walks out.
Steven, this is a safe place.
When they all line up against him and Steven has nowhere to go, I don't blame him for lashing out.
And again, Jim Carrey just so genius with it. The choice of password as the game, he gets to whisper directly in his ear each time.
So good.
But when he pulls out the Polaroid to that he threatens to show to Steven's ex-girlfriend, now girlfriend, I thought the Polaroid was going to be much more graphic. Like, you look at the photo and Steven's like, he was single. Robin was dating other men.
Yeah, she was dating Owen Wilson.
So what's so bad about a photo at a party where a woman's grabbing your head and trying to kiss you? Like, I've seen worse shit on Instagram feeds. It's not that bad.
No, you're stacking bad things now. He's just been arrested. Right. He's just been fired. She's starting to question a lot of things in his life. So if you throw on there that he's hanging out with prostitutes, this might be the thing that makes Robin finally leave.
So Steven has a nightmare about Chip breaking down his door and chasing him out the window in the middle of the night. Rick tells Steven that Chip was fired from the cable company for stalking customers. Chip calls Steven that night, telling him he is paying Robin a visit. And after visiting Robin's empty apartment, Steven tracks them down to the satellite dish, where Chip holds Robin hostage in a rainstorm. After a physical altercation and a chase, Steven is able to save Robin, and as the police arrive, Chip goes into a speech on how he was raised by television and apologizes to Steven for being a bad friend. Chip dives backwards from the top of a ladder above the satellite dish, falling onto it and knocking out the television signal to the entire town.
So at this point in the movie, I finally realize why I like Jim Carrey's physical comedy in this movie versus other movies. I was never a real big fan of Jim Carrey, like, slinking around and running like a weirdo or just being that, like, lanky, freaky guy in A Living Color. But when you dress it in a nightmare sequence, it's like, boom, it clicks. There is nobody else short of Gary Busey who could, like, pull this off so well. He's got the green, like, eye filter going on, and he just, like, bursts through the door, and he's moving like an animal, you know? And you're just like, Jesus Christ, like, he's kind of scary. Yeah. And it's great. It makes his physical comedy take on a new dimension that makes it far more palatable and entertaining.
Well, there were actually scenes that were cut from this movie. One was him doing like a headless horseman scene where he's chasing Matthew Broderick, and what they captured on film was scarier than the tone that they were going for. But like you said, this was the first time that he really got to flex some additional acting skills and kind of show that he had a little bit more depth than just kind of a one-note character that gets tired or repetitive. I mean, Dumb and Dumber 2, like, for Dumb and Dumber 1, comedic genius. Dumb and Dumber 2, okay, the joke is old. But it got me thinking, like, do you think Chip, and maybe it's just because, you know, I'm such a fan of Mindhunter on Netflix, do you think Chip has killed anyone? Do you think that's why he keeps changing his name? Is he almost like the cable guy serial killer? Because what happens when he takes people on these dates? He's giving them the same monologue, right? That's what they want you to know, is that he's doing the same tactics. Do you think eventually he would have killed Steven or he would have killed Robin? Or is it slightly more pathetic what's happening here?
I don't think that those are the options. You're either a killer
or you're pathetic.
Okay. But I don't think that he's killed anyone. I took the monologue thing as like sort of like, that was one of the moments where you looked at Chip and you were like, oh, he's like a smart guy. Like, he understands the potential of the internet and satellite communication. Then, you know, he gives Steven some like life advice that ends up working. You're like, oh, maybe that's so bad. Then you realize that he has a one-size-fits-all approach to everybody,
right?
And how he doesn't understand how in the context it's not helpful. When you take a woman against her will on a rainy night to the satellite dish and try to give her the same speech, it's not going to have the same impact. And the satellite dish was a really interesting place to sort of have the climax of the movie, because they're atop the satellite dish, and Jim Carrey as Chip, he's like, I don't have a plan. I don't know why we're up here. And it's funny because the movie is pointing out all the cliches of television,
right?
But it's employing cliches of television. Like, why is he at the top of the satellite dish? He doesn't know. What's his plan? He doesn't know. where did this fucking helicopter come from? Like, there's a helicopter. Like, normally, if you're trespassing and you get on a satellite dish, they're not sending a helicopter out. But that's what they would do on a TV show because you need that spotlight, you need the dramatic speech. So that sort of self-awareness where they're walking that line, it could go horribly wrong. And you've seen it go horribly wrong in movies, but this one's executed flawlessly.
But what's fantastic is they used that initial Sam Sweet murder trial that we loved throughout. They use that as an actual plot device at the end to teach us a lesson.
That's right.
Everyone's sitting watching the trial. The satellite dish goes out. Everyone sits around. They're like, okay, well, what do we do now? And there's the great shot of that one guy sitting on his couch. And he's like, okay, TV doesn't work. He turns around and there's a book sitting on next to his end table. And he looks at it like, oh my God, what is this mystical thing? He picks it up and starts reading. Very funny. You used that plot device of the trial throughout that worked. And in the end, they use it for a purpose other than a gag.
Yeah.
And it makes that comment, maybe sometimes so much television, besides fucking up kids, is fucking up adults.
Yeah. Yeah. The culmination of this trial that we're all focused on for no other reason than our own voyeurism really isn't that important when you think of it at the end of the day. Why we're so transfixed on stuff like that and make a spectacle of ourselves from it's culturally reprehensible when you think about it because we're just watching. We're not participating anymore. And that trope, like you said, of the satellite dish, it's the Dark Knight. It's fucking Joker and the Batman.
And Goldeneye.
Yeah. It's like you said, so many fucking layers. It's brilliant. Well, Chip survives the fall and avoids the satellite's middle spike, much to his dismay, and injures his back. As Steven and Robin reunite, Steven forgives Chip and asks for his real name. Chip jokingly replies, Ricky Ricardo. And Chip takes him to the hospital in the helicopter. When one of the paramedics addresses him as Buddy, Chip asks the paramedic if he is truly his buddy, to which the paramedic replies, yeah, sure you are, causing Chip to smile deviously. End movie.
So if you haven't seen clips of Jim Carrey recently, like talking on the red carpet or just free form, like expressing his views on things, he's got some really interesting views on reality and Hollywood and society as a whole. And after seeing this evolved true Jim Carrey, going back and watching a 90s Carrey movie, it's like rewatching Game of Thrones. Mm-hmm. Like you see these hints of who he really is reflected in his work. And it's like it's been there all along, but no one really realized it. And I think that's why this movie works, because he's tapping into his real persona, his real core. I think he really believed in the bigger message of this movie about the information superhighway and TV molding us as a nation. And it was like kind of a small, dark comedy crusade for this guy. Like, I think there was something more to it than a paycheck.
Not only that, but then you saw that when he went and did Man on the Moon, why it was so personal to him. That was something that he was raised on. And that was something that inspired him to do comedy, even though, help me out here. Annie Kaufman was a very dark individual and had those same, you had a lot of the comedians, when they commit suicide, there's a lot of angst and a lot of depression, a lot of suffering and anxiety that bleeds into the reason why they are the characters that they are. And I found myself sympathetic to a crazed character because I don't think it was his fault. And I like the fact that there's that little bit of does he survive? Does he do this again? Is it as good as maybe Chip dying? So there's absolutely no Cable Guy 2 ever to possibly have the chance?
Yeah, I mean, well, if we know anything from Hollywood, we know that somebody dying on screen doesn't mean shit. They'll still bring him back somehow. But no, you know what? It did two things for me that I really enjoyed. One is that it defied the cliche, right? He doesn't just die at the end. And honestly, like, we all kind of love Chip. Like, we don't want Chip to die. But also, another point of it that I really enjoyed was it gave him sort of that Michael Myers sort of like mystique where it's like he can't be killed. Like just because he didn't get impaled doesn't mean he shouldn't die. Instead, he's got a back injury and he's reciting like, police codes to get himself, picked up, which I'm sure is a TV illusion that I didn't get.
So good.
But it allows him the opportunity to strike again, right? It gave it that real, it honestly what it did was it said, you know what, this movie is not just a dark comedy. There's an element of horror in there. Yeah. Like he is the monster, right?
Yeah. I just really hope they don't ever reboot this movie and try it. I'm trying to think of who they would reboot it with today. We're like son of Cable Guy.
No, I think they learned that with The Mask. You don't do that. You can't reboot this.
No, you can't reboot
You know
anything.
he won't. I understand why they didn't make him die, because that would have been just too dark. This was already dark to begin with. If you killed off Jim Carrey, I don't think he's ever... Batman, he died. Batman Forever.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
Which you called it Batman Returns, but Batman...
Oh, Batman Forever, you're
He
right.
died in Man on the Moon.
Oh, wow. Too soon.
I've never seen it.
Wow. It's really good.
It is really good.
We have a lot of movies that are really good.
Okay, Dad. Jeez.
Well, now's the time of the podcast where we break out our Shat meters and give you our wipe scores. If you've never listened to the podcast before, Zero Wipes is a fantastic movie. It's like visiting medieval times in Schaumburg, Illinois, with the giant castle and the knights that can actually choreograph fights. A 5-wipe movie is like going to the Scottsdale Castle right when it opens and not having any air conditioning, and a show that has way too many horses and not enough wizards. With that being said, 0 wipes is good, 5 wipes is bad. We'll start with you, Gene. How many wipes do you give The Cable Guy?
This might be because it was my first time seeing it, so it had the full potency and punch that was intended, because you guys have seen it before. Maybe you've been a little bit numbed to it. But I think Jim Carrey is a genius after watching this movie. Everyone got out of the way and just let him do his thing. The movie is quick. It's clever. It dares to get very dark. Dogma, which we just reviewed, it attempted a big message, but it lost it in the noise of a bloated plot. Cable Guy uses the noise of a chaotic plot to ferry a smaller but more acute message. This is one of the most clever comedies I've ever seen. I definitely will be watching it again. I've been talking to everybody about it, and every time I do this weekend, I'm like, oh my God, Cable Guy. They're like, yeah, everyone knows that. We've all seen it before. I was like, well, fuck me for discovering shit late. But this is a fantastic movie. It is a 0 wipe, perfect comedy.
Yeah, Big D, how many wipes do you give The Cable Guy?
So I think it's a half wipe. The first time you watch it, and like the first time I was in the audience, it's strange. It's a bit scary, but Jim Carrey's performance, it's so intense that you actually think he might kill somebody. He could have killed somebody in this comedy and you wouldn't have been surprised. But the more you watch it, you'll even pick up additional layers. I think it gets better the more you watch it. So the Gene, you liked it the first time is a good start. But a lot of times movies like this, you'll remember 1 or 2 scenes. There were scenes that came up that Roger and I were like, holy shit, I forgot about this scene. I know where this is going. Holy shit. It's so good that the good scenes become so many that you don't even remember they're coming. So for me, it was a brave choice for Jim Carrey to choose this at his career. At this point, he's becoming the biggest actor in Hollywood. And he says, you know what? Screw you. I'm not going to do what everybody thinks. I'm going to take a different course. It was brave. It didn't work out as well because everybody thought this was a bomb and it kind of was a stain on his career. But at this point, I don't think he cares. But it is wall-to-wall jokes. It is funny. It is unique and nearly perfect. I think it's a half wipe.
Yeah, I agree. The movie is nearly flawless. The jokes do come at you a mile a minute. This was a fun experience, not just going to medieval times with everyone, but watching this movie together from start to finish. And Gene, it being your first time and us being there watching you during your first time with this movie, I think is something that I'll always remember. The jokes still hold up, even with a technology where many of us are cutting cable and don't even have cable boxes, but have other means. I think this is something that stands the test of time. And for me, it's not quite a 0 wipe movie because I think you want to save that, but it's nearly flawless. So for me, it's a 0.5 wipe as well. It's half a wipe. So, half a wipe, and 0 wipes. If we add that and divide by 3, we get what, Gene?
There's going to be some controversy out there in Shatland over this one. But this movie that came in 4th in Jim Carrey voting, but that gives us an average score, Raj, of 0.3 repeating wipes for The Cable Guy.
If we were to battle in medieval times and go toe to toe with other movies in the pantheon of Shat, where would The Cable Guy rank next to those other brave knights of the realm?
Yeah, people are going to lose their shit about this. This is movie 121, and with a 0.33, this is now tied in the 6th spot.
Oh, wow. Top 10.
With Terminator 2, Fight Club and The Big Lebowski.
Yeah, that feels right. I would watch this movie as many times as I would watch those other movies.
It's a very different movie. It's an hour and a half.
It's a tight 90 minutes.
I could watch this again right now. So it wasn't just the experience of the first time. It was pretty funny.
This movie's so good that it made me want to watch another movie, like immediately. Like you put on Not Another Teen Movie right after this, and I was like, fuck it. I'm so happy about laughing right now. I just want to keep laughing. This is great. It's fucking, this movie.
If you haven't seen The Cable Guy ever, or haven't seen it for a long time, I implore you to revisit it and not believe Rotten Tomatoes, because it is a work of comedic genius, and it might be the best. Well, at this point, I think it might be the best comedy. Are there any other comedies in the top 5?
Big Lebowski.
The Big Lebowski's not really a comedy. I mean, it's a comedy, but it's like it's
a gritty whodunit.
No, but it's like it's an artistic Coen like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
It's a comedy.
I mean, I guess The Big Lebowski is a comedy, but it's so much more than that.
There's no straight comedy that's in the top. But I don't think there's many straight. Groundhog's Day is probably the best that we've done at 13.
This is better than Groundhog's Day.
than Groundhog's Day.
Ooh, I feel dirty for saying it, but I agree.
This is a great fucking movie.
It's unexpected. It's unexpected, original, and I would watch it again. And that's what I use to kind of gauge whether a movie's good.
Well, now's the time of the podcast where we do our shout-outs. Do we have any shout-outs, Gene?
We do, Raj. We put out the call 2 weeks ago, and the shout-outs came pouring in. So, again, if you'd like to hear your name on the podcast, just go to shatthemovies.com. Be sure to vote while you're there for movies coming up in the future. And then go to any of the shout-out boxes on any of the screens. Put in your name. We'll read them on the podcast. This week's shout-outs go to Shane from Racine with 5 kids, Jason, Malcolm, Scott from Scotland, and his dog Tigger. She listens too. Shane Krause, Bobby Joe, Jody, Justin, Fede, never had a cool nickname, from Argentina, Nadim, Brian Powers, Stacy Ammenhauser, Kevin from Lancaster, it's me, it's Robbie T, Marcos, Gareth Gower of Nyanidlos, Kelly, will you marry me?
Nope, not that was not from me.
Kevin, Reglavkor, David, Mr. Miyagi's goatee, Chris Cupcake Whiting from Indiana, Chloe C, J.E., and Tiff. Thanks, everyone, for your shout-outs. Again, if you'd like to hear your name on the podcast, keep it clean. Please go to shatthemovies.com. Put your name in the shout-out box. Vote for your favorite movies.
We don't mind some light pranking when it comes, but keep it above board. Don't go lowbrow. Don't go
racist.
Don't do racist. You know?
Don't do that.
That's not. No one likes that. I mean, make it fun and light, but don't make it racist.
You almost got us.
You almost got us.
Almost got us.
I was playing on my phone. I apologize. I was like half paying attention. I mean, it's the shout outs. I mean, it's Gene's thing. All right. Well, what movie are we doing next, Big D? Another commission, right?
Yes, next week we're back on the commissions, and it comes from Stephanie M. In this action comedy, Unusual Circumstances find big, brawny cop John Kimball, played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, posing as a kindergarten teacher in order to apprehend a major drug lord, Cullen Crisp, played by Richard Tyson, as well as his ruthless accomplice and mother, Eleanor, played by Carol Baker. While pretending to be a kid-friendly instructor, Kimball falls for pretty fellow teacher Joyce Palmieri, played by Penelope Ann Miller, as he battles both unruly children and the dangerous bad guys. Commissioned by Stephanie M., it was released in December of 1990, directed by Ivan Reitman, and made over $200 million at the box office. So stay to the end, listen to the trailer, and you'll hear what's coming up next week.
That was the kind of movie that Clerks stopped Hollywood from making. These kind of movies.
It's a great movie.
Clerks? Or
both, actually.
Really? This one is? We'll see.
Schwarzenegger's.
Is he?
He's everything.
I don't know. Well, that concludes this week's episode of Shat The Movies. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're everywhere on social media, including Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram. Just follow @Shat The Movies, our Facebook, and all of our links are on our website. Just go to shatthemovies.com. If you want to email us your suggestions, email hosts @shatthemovies.com. If you want to support the podcast, just go to our support link. There you can commission upcoming movies for at least $100. We do ask, though, that you send in a letter with your reasoning why. and you complete that survey so we can get advertisers to help with some funds to keep the lights on over here at Shat the Movies and Shat on TV. You can find that survey link on our website, shatthemovies.com. We're everywhere fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe. And if you stop by iTunes, please be sure to leave a 5-star review. That really does help the podcast grow. You can also check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review television series such as Westworld, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, and True Detective. You can find all the information on the website, shatOnTV.com. On behalf of my co-host, Big D, Dick Ebert, and Gene Sam Sweet. Yeah, he's the one who killed Stan. I'm Roger Roeper.
Allegedly.
Be sure to join us next week for the following film review. Thank you so much for listening. Take care, good night, and good luck.
Now, more than ever, to be a teacher requires patience, kindness, and understanding. Fortunately, Astoria Elementary has just hired such an individual. Arnold Schwarzenegger is kindergarten cop.
Kindergarten is like the ocean. You don't want to turn your back on it.
Don't worry, everything is under control. No.
He's an undercover detective.
I assume you have some teaching experience.
They wouldn't have sent me otherwise.
Assigned to find a mother and son.
Did Danny ever say what Crisp's wife looked like?
Before a killer does.
First, I would like to just get to know you.
A male kindergarten teacher. That's unusual.
He's been trained to shoot.
What made you become a kindergarten teacher?
He's been trained to fight. But there are some things...
You mean you eat other people's lunches? Stop it!
He's never been trained to handle.
They're walking all over me.
Listen, Kimball, you gotta handle this like any other police situation.
You're going to be my deputy trainees. You're not gonna have your mommies run behind you anymore and wipe your little tushes. You're mine now.
I'm not a policeman. I'm a princess.
Arnold Schwarzenegger.
You hit the kid, I hit you.
Wow.
In an Ivan Reitman film.
Are you married, Mr. Kimball?
No, I'm not.
He's not married, Mom!
Welcome to Astoria, the single-parent capital of America.
You got a little mustache.
Must be from the milk.
Kindergarten Cop.
The